Have you ever wondered what makes creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life really as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lili Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how ideas become paintings or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community, and we'll explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. In our inaugural season, ArtStorming the City Different, we dipped our toes into the vast ocean of creativity with a focus on some of our favorite creators of Santa Fe, New Mexico. That conversation was enjoyed by artists and non-artists alike because it showed us how we can all benefit from learning how to generate something from nothing, dream bigger, charter new territories, and solve problems in new ways. In Season 2, we're going to take that concept of generating our lives with intention to the next level. This season, we're talking about legacy, art as legacy, and how the most creative among us tackle this rich and deeply personal subject. Welcome to ArtStorming, the Art of Remembrance. This episode of ArtStorming is underwritten in part by Zeitgeist Dance Theater and Francisco Gella Dance Works, organizations dedicated to advancing contemporary dance and dance education in New Mexico and beyond. What happens when the life you spend decades building suddenly stalls out? When you hit a wall in midlife and the old tricks just don't work anymore? How can you even think about building a legacy when your own life doesn't even inspire you anymore? Well, there's a school for that, and it's called Modern Elder Academy, and it was founded by my next guest, Chip Conley, boutique hotel pioneer and legendary Airbnb mentor. Chip joins us to share the exact moment he found his answers to those same questions above. A radical perspective-shifting brush with death that changed his relationship with time forever. In this hour, Chip shares the profound personal wake-up call that inspired him to create the Modern Elder Academy, giving birth to a global movement centered on a beautiful concept known as generativity, which is about learning how to harvest the wisdom you've acquired and pour it into the next generation, and how MEA programs can guide you to your own holy urgency, unlocking untold potentials for the next chapters of your life and inspired legacies to leave in your wake. Get ready to enter the creative field of Chip Conley. You are a busy guy. We are going to jump right in. So I am ArtStorming with Chip Conley, and you almost need no introduction. I think you've become so well known. But we're going to jump right in with you telling me a little bit about Modern Elder Academy, since that is the central focus, other than maintaining your health, of your life right now. And we'll get into all of it. I almost don't know where to start because between MEA and the books that you've written and your legacy projects and your near-death experience and everything else that you've got going on your plate, you're such the perfect guest for us because your life intersects with us in absolutely every single way. So I'm expecting that we'll just roll into all those topics and hit them eventually. But
I'm easy.
Yeah, you are. And that's what I love about you. So tell us a little bit, just to give our audience a little bit of a background about Modern Elder Academy, where the location, like the really top tier stuff,
Sure.
And then we'll get into it.
Yeah. The story before that was that I, for 24 years, started and ran a boutique hotel company called Joie de Vivre, based in San Francisco, created 52 boutique hotels. In my late 40s, I really struggled with the company, with life. You might have called it a midlife crisis, but it didn't fit the midlife crisis of Hollywood, where you buy a sports car to have an affair. It was more like I felt stuck and a little bit dark. And I had a flatline experience. I died and from an allergic reaction to an antibiotic. And that woke me up to saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And so by 50, I had sold the business at the bottom of the Great Recession. And I'd lost 5 male friends to suicide, all of them in midlife. And so I took 2 years to be curious, and then was asked by the founders of Airbnb to join them 14 years ago when nobody had ever heard of the company, small tech startup, they didn't know anything about hospitality or travel or anything like that. So spent 7.5 years there. They called me the Modern Elder. I didn't like that at first. because I didn't think of myself as elderly. They said, no, elder is a relative term. Like Tom Brady in the NFL is an elder as a quarterback in his early 40s. And long story short is I embraced the title modern elder of Airbnb when they said a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. And that's the long way of saying that when I moved from full-time to part-time, I started working on a book called Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And I was writing that book down in Baja. We're at a home on the beach and an hour north of Cabo San Lucas on the Pacific Ocean. And one day I went for a run on the beach and I had a Baja aha. I had this weird epiphany of like, why did I struggle so much in my late 40s when my 50s have been so good? Why did most of the friends of mine who took their own lives did so in their late 40s? And I decided to create the world's first midlife wisdom school. And that was 8.5 years ago. And when COVID came along, that opened and got a lot of press and got a lot of attention. And then when COVID came along, I said, we need to have a campus in the US. And I desperately wanted to do it in Santa Fe or in New Mexico. And that's really how the MEA campus in Galisteo Basin, just outside of Santa Fe near El Dorado and Lamy, came about. It's on a 2,566 acre regenerative horse ranch. And yeah, we now have almost 10,000 alumni from 60 countries who've come to either one of our two campuses for multi-day programs. Usually the average length of the program is 4 days. And we have 56 regional chapters around the world.
And at the risk of sounding like this is just a plug for MEA, I got a chance to tour the campus thanks to you a couple weeks ago. And man, oh man, if anybody wants to come to Santa Fe, no, really, I can't imagine. And I'm a total snob because I come from the interior design industry. I've traveled a lot. I consider myself very fortunate that way. But if somebody wants to have a deluxe, but low key and beautiful, I mean, like everything that Santa Fe has to offer is offered on that campus. And to add to that, this immersive experience that you are offering for, I think it should be required education for almost everybody in midlife. And it's true. I mean, we in midlife, and I am squarely in that category with you, we're living so much longer now that midlife as a really large bracket. And I read your most recent book, Learning to Love Midlife. I don't usually do a deep dive into people I talk to, but I did that first and then I decided to have you as a guest. So did a little bit differently. And it was just because everything that I read there. But one of the things that I wanted to focus on is that in that book, and this may have come from your experience with the Airbnb people, that you define midlife as it could start anywhere from 30s to, or maybe it's 40s and then on. And that's a big chunk of time. So speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Midlife, first of all, we don't like to think about midlife. It's like a club we don't want to join. And
like the AARP.
Yeah, exactly. Which they send you the card before you're 50. The thing about midlife is that it is a relatively new life stage because the average longevity in the year 1900 was only 47 years old. So by the end of the century, by 2000, it was 77. So as a result, midlife became a life stage. And it became a life stage between early adulthood and later adulthood. And depending upon how you define early adulthood and later adulthood, midlife would be the bridge in between. And the longer we live, in many cases, the longer we live, all of the additional years of longevity are in midlife. So as I was doing my research for creating the world's first midlife wisdom school, MEA, but also for that book, I talked with a lot of sociologists and even some philosophers. And the thing I kept hearing from them was, we're moving into a direction in which midlife may start at 35, which is a little earlier than how it's historically been thought to start. And it actually lasts till 75. But I think those are permeable boundaries because we've had people as young as 22 and as old as 95 come to MEA. 25% of the people who come to MEA are millennials or Gen Z. So then people are not coming exclusively for the age component. That's an important part of it. It's an important part of our curriculum is how do we reframe aging and longevity? Because Becca Levy at Yale, who's worked with us on our curriculum, has shown that when you shift your mindset on aging in midlife from a negative to a positive, which is hard to do in an ageist culture, but if you can shift your point of view on aging as being a positive, not negative, you gain 7.5 years of additional longevity. So I think part of what we're trying to do is help people with that. But also the reason we have both younger and older people is because we help people to understand what we call TQ, transitional intelligence. And frankly, we're always going through transitions. There's a Harvard professor named Dan Gilbert who's a friend, and he says, human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. And that's really true. When you're an adolescent in teen years, you know you're going through change. But somehow when we get into adulthood, we think somehow if we're going through a bunch of changes in our life, so we got the game of life wrong. But transitions are critical at any age, as is purpose, as is wisdom. And so those are three of our pillars of our program. And frankly, the younger a person is who's learning wisdom management practices, how to become wiser, the longer they have to use that wisdom.
And it's so desperately needed. I mean, one of the things we do in our program is we talk a lot about legacy. And the way we are talking about legacy is not the name on a building that you leave behind. It's what you leave in people. And it's never too soon to start that as a practice because it's about being present. It's about all of the things that you teach in your Wisdom Academy. And there's no age bracket really on that. To live a more conscious, more awake, more alert, more contributive lifestyle should be something that everybody would like to do. And unfortunately, sometimes, as with you, as with me, it takes a wake-up call to kind of be a catalyst for that. So speaking of catalyst for that.
Do people know about your wake-up call?
I think some people who have been listeners know that my wake-up call started having lost both of my parents at early ages. My father, when I was in my early 20s, and he died in the AIDS epidemic in 1985. And so that was a wake-up call because he was not expecting to die. We weren't expecting to lose hundreds of people that we knew and cared about. So that whole thing in and of itself was a wake-up call. When he died, there were a lot of superstitions around the death, how you dispose of a body, etc. I mean, it was like the pandemic. It was really freaky. It was so early that they still made me burn all of his personal effects in his apartment. I went as a young person to his apartment to dispose of everything. Anyway, it was a miserable, horrible thing. And then, of course, they had that time, they believed that anybody who had contact with him needed to be tested every 7 years because he was believed to be that highly contagious. It turns out that it was much more worrisome that he be infected by people who came in off the street. Anyway, he ultimately ended up in reverse isolation. Ultimately, he died. But that was my first wake-up call because it was my first really intimate brush with death. And what do you do with that life? Like, how do we properly tribute that? And he didn't have a religious institution. So finding a church in New York that I could place to do the memorial service, et cetera, et cetera. So that was tier one. And then tier two happened with 9 years later when my mother was killed here in Santa Fe in a skydiving accident. And she was 53 and Daddy had been 50. So in both cases, these were people in midlife, squarely in midlife, who did not plan to die. They did not have their ducks in a row in terms of all of that. And it fell on me to figure that out. And as a 20-something-year-old, early 30-something-year-old, I did not have a peer group that was prepared to support me through that passage of life. And so for me, the wake-up call was, how do you live your life with this awareness that it could happen at any time? And then without any listening in the community for supporting that idea. So I wasn't yet quite in midlife. So there weren't any sort of books or thinking about that yet. So my situation's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it, is that there are so many entry points into this conversation, and we all have the thing that sparks us. I never would have believed that 30 years later, I would be involved in a project that is completely focused on this and finding so much community and finding so many close associations with people who not only get what I'm trying to do now, but are joining into the concert. And so it was such a delight to meet you, because in reading your book, I feel like I know more about you than you know about me.
Which is why I wanted our listeners to know more about you too. And I appreciate your vulnerability.
Well, thank you. I mean, and it's funny because I have to be careful because I can speak so candidly about it in a way that, deep in my past, and I've done so much work around it, that I can be very cavalier about it. And I don't know that I'm being cavalier about it until I see that sort of shock in the eyes of the person that I'm sharing with. And then I realize I kind of have to reel it back a little bit, or just be present with the shock that they're experiencing. But it is for 30 years given me an access to be there for people in my life who have gone through everything from terminal illnesses to tragic losses. In the moment, I was for 10 years the person who was putting together the memorial service because I was the only one who could keep my shit together, deeply understand what they were going through, and help metabolize the whole situation. And so as I was reading your book, there were so many moments where I was like, oh yeah, that's my brother, that's my brother, that's my brother. So again, another reason I'm so thrilled to be having this. But say a little bit more about you and the experience, the NDE, which I heard a little snippet about when we were touring your campus, and I got to hear you share with some of your very appreciative, whatever you call them, participants.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was going through a really hard time in my late 40s and losing friends. The Great Recession was quite punishing to my hotel business. I had an African-American foster son who was going to prison wrongfully, long-term relationship potentially ending. It was just, and I'm running out of cash. My first mentee in my life when I was 35 and he was 28 was a guy named Gavin Newsom. And so Gavin...
Never heard of him.
Yeah, Gavin was starting a hospitality business. His sister felt like he was clueless. She knew me. She introduced him to me because I was a hospitality guy and 7 years as senior. And so next thing I knew, I'm mentoring him. Many years later, for his second wedding, he threw a bachelor party and we were playing baseball. And I broke my ankle playing baseball at his bachelor party. And I got a septic leg because I had got some fertilizer in my leg. So I was on... Yeah, it was a bad thing. I'm still very close with Gavin. I still mentor him a little bit. But bottom line is that it was not good. And it really became clear at his wedding in Montana where I got quite sick. But I didn't die then. It was only a couple weeks later after I was put on one antibiotic that didn't work. And then I was put on a stronger antibiotic. And I had an allergic reaction to that antibiotic. And I was giving a speech in St. Louis and I was on stage on crutches. And thankfully I sat down to sign books and then I went unconscious. My experience over the course of the next 90 minutes going flatline 9 times was that I was in this big living room on the second floor of a chalet or something in the Swiss Alps or some place that was just quite bucolic, and it was like the woods in the forest. And all this light was coming in and I was flying around the living room, 40-foot tall ceilings with 40 birds. There were 40 birds just flying with me. They were speaking to me and I understood bird talk and I was speaking back and they understood me. And the thing they kept saying to me was slow down. You just have to slow down because you will not see beauty or awe unless you slow down. And I was wearing slow down slippers, one that said slow, the other one said down. Weirdly, 3 years earlier, one of my hotels I'd created was the Hotel Vitale in San Francisco, across the street from the Ferry Building. And we literally had slow down slippers in that hotel. So everything, I could go into much more detail, but I'll leave it at that. It was very sensuous. It was very peaceful. It was very full of light. Everything was slow motion. And I took away from it with this deep sense that I needed to learn how to slow down. And each time I would come back to life at the point where the birds flew out the window of the living room. And I was trying to fly out the window, but the moment I would try to fly out the window, I would come back to life. Yeah, provocative. And for me, my life has two chapters really. There was 47 years old and earlier when I had not had that experience, and then there was experience, and then it was after that, in which there was a sort of a holy urgency to my life. And it's weird to me, holy urgency and slow down. How do you do both of those? It's sort of a weird combination. The slow down I have struggled with, to be honest with you. I know how to take Sunday as my sabbatical, which I do. And I've learned how to just love spaciousness. So I have workaholic tendencies, but I also am pursuing my calling, which is the holy urgency piece, which it means that I'm not doing it to distract myself from, emotions. I love the work I do because I have a calling, and that's where the holy urgency comes, because there's a deep sense of, I have no idea how many years I'm going to live. I now have metastatic stage 3 prostate cancer that is spread to my lymph system. And I've known I've had cancer for 8 years, and I've been in stage 3 status for 3.5 years. Almost all of that 3.5 years in some form of treatment or surgery or radiation. And right now I'm on hormone depletion therapy, which means I have no testosterone. But I've had this holy urgency, this sense of I'm here for a reason. And so I need to figure out, how do I have spaciousness while also feeling like I'm being true to the calling, whatever that calling is. And that calling has varied over the course of my time since age 47. But right now the calling is MEA.
Wow. I can so relate to that because I'm I'm not battling a terminal illness right now, but in terms of the balance between the slowdown and holy urgency. So my initiatives are all, and it takes a type A personality to get them done. And so it's this thing, and I almost never rest because it's my joy. And so to take myself out of my joy of pursuing these projects is unthinkable. And I don't think I'm using them to avoid emotional stuff, but I think that would be such an incredible program for you to offer to those of us who are kindred souls out there, a program for holy urgency balanced with slow down. Because a lot of the programs that you offer, I think, and they're also magnificent. I looked at them as a possibility of taking one. And a lot of them are about finding that holy urgency. But if you're already there and you're on it like a freight train, it's a slightly different thing. And one of the things that we're trying to foster in people is finding that legacy project that so lights you up, that it carries you through, and it's bigger than oneself. It is that thing that plugs us into our community and that resonates so widely that it starts to take on a life of its own. And then that has to be managed also, that life of its own, which can be very demanding.
You know what would be probably helpful for you is one of our silent retreats. And I know it's hard for you to imagine that, but maybe you've done a silent retreat before, but our silent retreats are an opportunity to press the button on pause and the constant monkey mind. And how do you get in touch with some of the deeper longings, yearnings, and feelings you have, and find mindfulness practices that are really life-sustaining. So yeah, and we have 2,566 acres. It's 4 square miles. So the idea of being able to have a silent retreat in an environment where you can go for long wisdom walks on your own or with a partner and be silent, but just notice nature. And of course, that's part of the reason we're in New Mexico, is because nature is a teacher, and especially in a place where you are not going to run into somebody because you're on private land.
I want to take another minute to remind listeners that ArtStorming is a listener-supported nonprofit, and we want to thank Zeitgeist and Francisco Gella Danceworks for their generous support. With their support and yours, we can create more compelling stories, more in-depth articles, and a greater impact on our community. If you love what you hear, please join our efforts. Visit our website for more ways to engage, and thank you for being an essential part of our work. Yeah, I mean, that would be such a delightful treat. And when we live here, those of us who have the benefit of living in Santa Fe, I take advantage every day of walking in the mountains and in the foothills, and I just looking out my windows at night, I get these incredible sunsets and rainbows. And so I have little mini moments of those, but who couldn't benefit from a more deeply immersive experience of that in a big way?
Yeah. No, it's great. I love New Mexico. My story with New Mexico in terms of why even choosing Santa Fe or New Mexico, it was when I was a kid, my uncle used to work for the Navajo Nation in Window Rock, Arizona, which was the capital of the Navajo Nation, which is on the border of Arizona and New Mexico. And so we would go and drive and visit him during the summertime and then drive into New Mexico. And I used to say to my parents, do I have to have a passport to be in New Mexico? And they would say, no, this is part of the US. But then we'd get to Santa Fe and I was like, this is not like any city I've ever seen before. Santa Fe just struck me as this place caught in time with a patina. The patina that you go to Havana, Cuba, or to Bhutan, and there's places that have a patina of time. And it was that patina of Santa Fe that really struck me. And then when I was starting my boutique hotel company, I used to come to Santa Fe and buy furniture and work with some people there or in Santa Fe who could help source interesting kinds of fabrics. I bought stuff from Surratt and Sons. This is 35 years ago that I was doing this. So there's a history there. And overall, I would say I'm really 90% certain it was the right place. The challenge with Santa Fe for some people or for New Mexico is it's dry, not dry in terms of no alcohol, but just it's a dry place. And so for some people, that's an issue. That's a little bit of an issue for me. Altitude is not an issue for me, but for some people it is. But I think the biggest issue, frankly, in terms of the ease of doing business and ease of getting things done, is not so much that it's hard to get things done in New Mexico. That can be true sometimes with construction projects. But the harder thing is this. I chose Santa Fe, and it was a group of 4 of us. We chose Santa Fe, I chose Baja, because I love the idea of a pilgrimage. I love the idea that in order for someone to come and do a retreat with us, it wasn't like they're going to commute. It's not like in Sonoma or live in San Francisco or Ojai for LA or Hudson Valley for New York. You have to really actually make an effort. And in times like these where airline prices have spiked by 40%, 50%, it works against us because of the fact that it's not as easy to get to. And we know that direct flights to Santa Fe are limited. There's only 4 cities. And even direct flights to Albuquerque are limited in certain parts of the US and the world, because we've had, again, people from 60 countries come. So there are times when I wish Santa Fe was a little more accessible. At the same time, here's the thing. When you're going to a transformational retreat program in your own backyard, it's hard to change your habits when you don't change your habitat. And so the premise of people coming and feeling a little liminal, a little awkward, I don't know this place, this is not my normal habitat, is good, because people are a little bit more open to shifting as a result.
That's a really interesting insight. I would completely agree with that on every level. And the intentionality that one has to bring to it. And then also when they leave and they go back home, it's different enough that when they get home, when I used to have, before I did this, I had a company called Urban Art Tripping, and I used to do immersive art experiences for people in Santa Fe, bringing them in when I moved here, but also all around the world. And a lot of that was based on a program that I did when I was in high school that was called Intercultural Action Learning Program, InterALP. And the idea was to, we would be immersed into a culture different from our own. And I was on a Greek island, and the head of my program said, yeah, well, you think that the 3 or 4 months that you're having here are an eye-opening experience. This whole program is designed so that when you get home, you bring all those questions that you brought to this culture and you apply them to your own culture. And I realized when I left that program, and I left this little tiny island in Greece where I'd been for 4 months, I had so many questions about my own culture that had never occurred to me. I'd never been plucked out of my country and my language and my everything. And I'd been to other countries before, but not in such an immersive experience. And so I think in the same way, your programs or anything that we embark on where we are getting curious and wanting to learn and wanting to grow by completely immersing ourselves in something that's completely different and then going home. Now, you've experienced something really profound, and I would imagine that one of the things that MEA offers is a way to stay connected to the people with whom you went through that experience. Because that is so much of, the learning starts when you get home and you have to integrate.
Yeah, I was on the board of the Esalen Institute in Big Sur for 10 years. And one of the things I learned there was people loved the place because it was just exquisite location and has hot springs on the cliffs above the ocean. It's a dramatic environment. But as an institution, the institution did a very poor job of keeping people connected if you're in a workshop. So the reality was that, left Esalen after 2 days or 5 days there and it off really quickly. So our cohorts are intentionally small-ish. They can be as small as 8 to 10 people or as large as 40 to 50 people, depending upon the workshop. We just had Richard Rohr, the Catholic mystic and spiritual teacher, and we had a fully sold out campus. We have 43 bedrooms on the whole campus on the ranch. And so when you're in a cohort, at the end of the cohort, you get to know everybody. And at the end, the cohort has Zoom calls. We have groups from 8 years ago that still have monthly Zoom calls. And then you go back home, and depending upon where you live, if you're in Chicago, there's a Chicago MEA, alumni chapter, and you do programs with them for free. And you have potlucks, and you have guest faculty of ours who come and give talks, and you have service projects where you're going out into the community and doing something as a group. So it's a bit of a movement. It's a community and a movement as much as it is a school. But we call it long life learning, not lifelong learning. The idea that long life learning is learning how to curate a life that's as deep and meaningful as it is long. Because lifelong learning, you could learn how to do photography at 30 or 70. You may have a different perspective on it, but learning the mechanics of medieval war strategy or photography is maybe the same as for a 30-year-old or a 70-year-old. But long life learning is learning the life stages and understanding what midlife is meant for and what your point of view is at, say, 45 or after with respect to purpose and transitions and wisdom and aging and a bunch of things that frankly are almost less the kind of thing you can learn by studying AI and more the things you learn based upon conversations with others. And that's why we call ourselves a wisdom school, because there's a lot of wisdom to be shared amongst those people who are coming to the program. Average age of the person who comes is about 54, 55 years old, about 65 to 70% women. And people of all different financial backgrounds, because about half the people who come to MEA are either on a full or partial scholarship.
Wow. And where does that endowment come from? Is that just built into the...
It is a combination of me funding it. And the other is we raise $1.5 million a year from our alumni to help fund that in order to enhance our diversity.
That's just incredible. And I think that having that intergenerational conversation, it's funny, I was just having this conversation this morning that the way we define generation has shifted. It seems to now be like decade chunks instead of 30-year chunks, which it was when we were coming through. But just having these conversations that span those stages of life that you're talking about, because one of the things that we're discovering in our Art of Legacy toolkit and the work we do around that is that the model for so long was that I go through life, I figure out what's important to me, I collect or I start a project that's important to me, and I develop it until it's time for me to pass it off, and then I bequeath it to my family who has not had a single conversation with me about it, but it lands on their lap, right? And so what I think there, and I'm as passionate about educating people about that intergenerational conversation around legacy as you are about midlife, and to me, they go hand in hand, is how do we ignite that interest around a particular project, but then share it, and if not with our family, at least with people in younger generations, so that a legacy project doesn't reach to a certain point and then just it disappears because there's no interest and there has been no cross conversation with the people coming through the ranks.
Yeah. I mean, I think in an era where we're all distracted, the opposite of presence is distraction. And we live in a distracted era partly because of our phones. We live in a polarized era partly because of social media. And so the idea of curating deep, rich conversations, whether that's with family members or best friends or your spouse, or whether that's with workmates, because we do a lot of B2B enterprise level programs with companies and peer-to-peer networks of leadership. We have leadership in New Mexico coming in late summer for their annual program. So how do you help people go a little deeper in their conversations? People are thirsty for it. They really are. They're thirsty for something that's less superficial. And the thing that's I've loved, Lily, is that while MEA tends to attract a more educated and slightly more liberal or progressive clientele, the truth is people come from all walks of life and all parts of the world. And it's so fascinating to have a group of people getting to know each other. They don't know each other's last names. They have not seen each other's LinkedIn profiles. They're just getting to know each other from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. So you're going to judge people the first night, like, okay, that's what we do. But when you get to know people, and then 3 days into it, 4 days into it, you realize, oh my God, my best friend in this cohort is someone who has a totally different political point of view than I have. And what it does is it wakes you up to saying, I want to listen a little bit more. And I want to judge a little bit less. I want to be curious. There's this thing called moral beauty. Dacher Keltner, who's a UC Berkeley professor, and he studied awe. He's an MEA faculty member who teaches every December in our Baja campus. And moral beauty is this idea. It's the number one pathway for experiencing awe in the world, which is really interesting. It's even more prevalent than someone being in nature. And he found that the number one pathway to awe is not nature, but it's actually moral beauty. To be able to witness the compassion and kindness, the equanimity, the tenacity, the grace, the courage of someone else. And it elevates you such that you feel like you can do the same. And so that's really what I think is one of the keys to our program.
That's incredible. And I did not know that when I started my Art of Conversation dinners, which were just originally designed to be supporting the podcast series, because we were talking about death as muse and artful exit and art of remembrance, things that are topics that are not the things you usually talk about at a dinner party or in life in general. We wanted to create a context where people could dive a little more deeply into those topics. And so we started having these monthly dinners where I invite 7 strangers to come to my table. And we have prompt cards underneath each plate. And at a certain part of the dinner, we start to read our quotes and our questions, and we go around the table. And so it's been an incredible experience for those, on a tiny scale compared to what you're doing at MEA. But finding that having the anticipation of people coming to a dinner where they know they're going to go deep into something, they don't know exactly how it's going to be orchestrated or what the adventure is going to be. But in just one evening, you take 7 strangers and introduce them to a topic that they've likely never discussed over a meal, and to people that they've never met before. And the synergy or the combination of that is nothing short of delicious, just to use a food term. But it is so yummy, and it's so nourishing, and so many food analogies that one could use. And I noticed that when I went on a tour of your campus, that you had some in the dining room, I think it was, or maybe it was in the library, but you had a list of questions for people to just sort of consider. And that idea of, and I've always loved the spiritual of inquiry, or the spiritual traditions of inquiry. That's always been the closest entry point, because when you're in a question, you don't have time for the mind chat or the answers. It's really more in an entry point into that awe and wonder. And I love the book that teacher wrote called Awe. Yeah, I love that book.
That's Dacher's book. Yeah. Jimi Hendrix said long ago, knowledge speaks and wisdom listens. And Pablo Picasso said, computers are useless. They only give you answers. So learning how to craft a beautifully composed question is a gift. It really is.
It is such a gift. And I love that sharing a question and having that form. So I want to know a little bit more about the post MEA cohorts that you have organized to help people stay in community with each other. And if you know of any particular initiatives that have come out of people coming through the experience and then continuing the conversation later, and what has happened in the world as a result of that.
Well, businesses have been started, marriages have happened, nonprofits have been started together, collaborated on annual vacation trips have been planned with, there's a group of 16 people who go to Europe every year as an MEA collective. There's so much. Actually, a couple scientific discoveries in the AI space. So there's just been a lot. And I think part of it is creating the conditions for people to let their guard down and to feel that collaborative spirit, as opposed to the thing that Richard Rohr has said is that the first half of our life, our primary operating system is our ego, and then we overuse it. And then around midlife, there's a new operating system, but nobody gave us any operating instructions. It's called the soul. And when we move from the ego to the soul, we move from a place of I to we, and we move into this place where collaboration is more accessible to us, partly because we are less focused on comparison and trying to please people, and we are more focused on just looking at where is the common connection, how do we fit together. It's beautiful.
That makes me wonder, with people aging, with longevity being so front and center and people able to stay in their work life, in their career compartments longer, I feel it almost makes me wish that there was like a required retirement date for people so that they could graduate to this newer, more important stage. I call it more important stage of life, because there's nothing wrong with being part of the economy and part of the engine that keeps things going, although there are a lot of unintended consequences as a result of that. I just feel like there was an era, maybe I'm romanticizing, but there was an era when philanthropy and the things that we did after we finished working took up a lot more of our life and our contribution. And I feel like there has been a loss of a sense of contribution back into the whole. And I feel like programs like yours and inquiries like mine are sort of designed to help interrupt that and bring us back into the fold, because there's so much juice in that.
Yeah.
Not to do good and not a do-goodery kind of Pollyanna reason, but because of all of possibilities that can merge from that.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think for a lot of people, they are staying in their work longer by both choice, because they love the work and maybe they're a workaholic, and by necessity. And a lot of it's because of necessity, because they can't afford to retire. It's hard to finance a 30-year retirement with a 40-year career. And so some of it's that. Some of it is the fact that we have created some age segregation in our culture, such that the idea of passing on wisdom, which happened often in our family in the past, especially if a multi-generational family situation, is less likely. And therefore, there's a sense of you don't want to be irrelevant as you get older. And so there's a sense of like, okay, I got to keep working because I want to stay relevant, because there's not anybody for me to pass my wisdom on to. So we've done a really poor job as a country in fostering that kind of intergenerational collaboration and wisdom sharing. Erik Erikson's a developmental psychologist who in the 20th century popularized the term generativity. It was the idea of there's a stage in your life where something's supposed to come through you. You're supposed to be a conduit generating things for future generations. And he had a 5-word sentence, I am what survives me. And that he wasn't talking about, as you mentioned earlier, the library building that has your name on it. It was the impact you'd had on that person who was not even a formal mentee, but it's the kind of person who would go to your eulogy and say something about you. And I think for a lot of us, we overemphasize the resume way too long in our life. We underemphasize the importance of building the character that will lead to your eulogy. And in many ways, that's what I try to do with MEA. I don't get paid. I don't have any investors. I made a lot of money, especially in my Airbnb era. And I wanted to do something that was giving back, that gave me a sense like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey, he was going to throw himself off the bridge until Clarence the Angel came down and said, hey, George, this is what this town would look like if you'd never lived. I want us all to have that kind of experience, this weird sense that I wish the Silicon Valley tech bros would come up with a product that could show us what the world would look like if we had not existed. Because feeling, as we get older, it's not about feeling youthful, although that's nice. It's about feeling useful. And it's that sense of utility and having some reason, some raison d'etre, for some reason for being, that is so essential to having a person feel like they're having a longer, healthier, happier life.
Absolutely. So can you say a little bit more? I'm very curious about the business-to-business programs that you make available through MEA so that a corporation can come on campus and develop. Is it a program that you deliver to them? Because the idea of creating a conversation like this inside a company so that people who maybe don't have family nearby, who don't have family period, have a way to have that intergenerational conversation and that wisdom passing.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
The kinds of organizations that come to us and at both campuses, both Baja and Santa Fe, are everything from YPO, Young Presidents Organization, which has older people above 50 as well, to Leadership New Mexico, which is leaders around the state doing a year-long program. to a program called Togethering, which is mixed couples, marriages between a Jewish person in the couple and a non-Jewish person. And they go through our program. They do about 10 of them a year, 10 different workshops a year, to families who want to go through the program to build better intergenerational rapport and wisdom sharing. So they have one of the three options. One is they come and do the MEA program, and we tell them, okay, it could be transitions, purpose, wisdom, aging, and we do leadership programs as well. The opposite alternative is they come and they have all of the MEA benefits: horseback riding, hiking, yoga classes, hot tubs, 3 gourmet meals a day. But in the classroom, it's just their content. And then we have groups that are actually sort of the hybrid of both. It's like, we're coming for 4 days. We'd like 2 days of MEA content and 2 days of our own content. Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx, she did her 54th birthday party at MEA. She's an MEA alum, and she brought a bunch of her friends, and they just did a private retreat experience with us. And so there's a deep sense that I think a lot of people are looking at this and saying, we do a lot of education of people young in life. Where's the education in the middle of your life, other than the school of hard knocks? And so, so that's our B2B programs.
Yeah, well, I can't let go of the visual of a bunch of ladies in Spanx in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's such a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
I think this is the least Spanxy place there might be on planet Earth.
Except for Sarah's really interesting. Yeah, she's not a Spanxy. I mean, she started Spanx, but like reality, and she's a billionaire now, but she's one of the few female billionaires who started her own company in the United States. And yet she became a billionaire before she was 50. And so she's in a state of her life where she's really curious about these questions. The U-curve of happiness research shows that the low point of life satisfaction is between about 45 and 50. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we've done so much research at MEA on this. And so it's not surprising that Sarah would have come to MEA at right around 50. She's had a mindset, which is that all there is? And it doesn't mean that she wasn't happy in her life. She was, but there was an element of she'd succeeded. And yet there was a deep sense that there was something more to life. So
I just heard for this weekend for the first time, it had never occurred to me, but apparently the time that we are living in now, there are more postmenopausal women than there have ever been. And in the world, there are only 3 species that live post-reproductive stage.
Whales.
And that would be whales, humans, and now chimpanzees. They're learning that there are some post-reproductive chimpanzees out there. But considering that we comprise such a huge amount of the population, again, this urgency for there to be new rituals, new initiations, new ways to take advantage of these humans that we become in that stage of life, which, that what the studies that they've done show that they're in that earlier stage of life, you're really focused on caring for the immediate people in your family. And then as you become postmenopausal, your focus is really much more on the community. And what an incredible resource for the world to take advantage of men and women who both kind of graduate from that me and is that all there is, Alfie? What's it all about? And then go into that. I mean, for me, my motivation for doing this whole project and why I love what you're doing so much is that I have this, we talk about in my program, this idea of creating 1 million, if not more, sovereign creatives, and that giving people access to their creativity is about the most important thing we can do on the planet right now, given all of the challenges that we face and the unintended consequences from the problems that we thought we solved, that turn up other problems. We really need to be nimble. We really need to be on our game in terms of how we address these problems, especially with the advent of AI, who can do a lot of fix the hard problems, but the soft problems and the more problems that need empathy and things that the machines can't do for us. It's on us to come up with that. And so I find it so important, and not as you don't have to be an artist. That creativity can come through in a myriad of ways. And again, my just absolute hats off to you for what you're doing. And I hope it continues for a long time. Do you feel like there are people within your organization who own it enough that this whole project continues even when the force of Chip is not there?
Yeah, it's a great question because, when I was 47 and had my flatline experience, I was running a company with 3,500 employees and I had never created a succession plan. I didn't expect I was going to have a flatline experience. And I think my ego was too invested in being the center of the universe. And this time, having started this business at 57, I will say that I created another version of being the center of the universe. And it has taken me over the course of a few years to realize a few things. Number one is I started it, and I'm the founder, but I did have two people from the start. I call them my co-founders, but it was my idea and my money and my content. But the reality is they had a huge impact, Christine and Jeff. And so I had to learn collaboration skills with co-founders. That was something I didn't have to do in my boutique hotel company, Joie de Vivre. And then I have had to learn that I don't have the energy in my 60s, forgetting about my whole cancer thing. I don't have the energy that I used to have. And I'm now the elder in the company. When I started Joie de Vivre, I was 26. So when I was in my late 40s, like I still didn't feel like the elder. But now I am definitely the elder in the organization. And so there's that. And how do you help groom and mentor others to be better, and what kind of joyous experience that is? But also the cancer. The cancer puts me in a place where we don't know if I have 3 years left or 30 years left. Just don't know. And so it's prudent to have a succession plan. A year and a half ago, I elevated our CMO to become a CEO, which was great. And I'm trying to learn how to be not the hero, but the coach. I'm used to being the hero. Heroes want us to come in and save the day, ego gratification. The coach is really asking great questions and helping people maybe younger than them to find their own answers. And so that's one piece. I literally just got off a call with 7 people in my organization looking at our 2027 workshop calendar. And while I have been the primary brains and contacts around what workshops we have and who we invite to the campus for the first 9 years of what we've been doing, next year I'm not doing that. And this was a brainstorm opportunity. I will be teaching less next year. I actually teach more than anybody else on the whole team, which is grueling and lovely. I love it. I love it deeply. Otherwise I wouldn't do it. But at the same time, I don't want to teach 60 workshops a year. That's a lot of workshops. And it may not be 60, but it was in the first 4 months of this year, it was 22 public workshops or private retreats that I was either primarily leading, co-leading, or did at least a couple drop-ins to. So that's a lot of different intimacy groups. So next year will be less. And the good news is we have so many really smart and wise and facilitators and teachers and in-house faculty and guest faculty and everybody from Elizabeth Gilbert to Arthur Brooks to Martha Beck to Richard Rohr, Michael Franti, David White, so many interesting people who have fallen in love with the MEA ethos that I feel if I were to die in the next 3 years, we're set up to have a long-term organization in place.
So thrilled to hear that. And and it's more than just an organization, I will say, because you've started a movement, and it's much harder to create a succession plan for a movement than it is for an organization. And I am sympathetic to that because the whole new age movement that we all grew up in, it's been going, but it's a little different when you start to really fine tune it and you want to make sure that your people are in alignment with what you've created with your baby. It's like it's a thing. So I'm deeply appreciative of what you have in front of you.
If you're going to be part of a movement, you got to move out of the way at some point.
That's a great place to end it.
Yeah.
We got to move out of the way. Chip, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much. I trust you'll be back in Santa Fe. I think I'll see you this weekend. You're coming in for the Santa Fe Magazine Festival.
I'm interviewing Andrew Weil. In fact, I need to reach out to him again. I'll be doing that. And we also have every 2 year, our biannual MEA alumni homecoming over the same weekend. So lots and lots, hundreds of MEA alums from all over the world flying in for that.
I wish we knew it. It's kind of like a full moon effect. I mean, you've got all these people with all this awareness.
Is it a full moon happening this weekend? I don't know.
I don't know, but it feels like the energy of all of these people being in Santa Fe at the same time creates the same kind of concept. It's going to shift something. I don't know, but thank you for everything that you do in this corner of the universe. And I look forward to having you on my Art of Conversation dinners in September. I think we already have that scheduled. And so I will look forward to this conversation continuing. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, Lily.
Okay. Take good care. Thanks again, honey.
Bye, sweetheart.
Bye. See you soon. So thanks for joining us today. Support for ArtStorming comes from Zeitgeist Dance Theater and Francisco Gella Dance Works. You can find them at franciscogelladance.com and zeitgeistdancetheater.org. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge NM and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms or wherever you listen. Your subscriptions, likes, comments, and shares help us to reach more listeners and attract the support we need to thrive in these challenging times. If you love what you hear, please consider making a contribution. We rely on your help to keep these conversations going. Every dollar you contribute goes directly into programs that support our mission. And we've been offered a matching grant that will match every dollar that you contribute. That means more compelling stories, more in-depth articles, and an even greater impact on our community. Please visit our website at www.artbridgenm.org, and thank you so much for being an essential part of our work.